Hello, everyone. Welcome to these self-knowledge lectures. Today we will see this interesting topic that comprises two conferences in one, the dimensions and where these dimensions are in us. In this lecture, we will explore the various dimensions of nature in detail, understanding their characteristics, the beings that inhabit them, and how these dimensions exist within us. As it is outside, so it is inside. If we seek to access the higher dimensions of nature, we must first learn to navigate and master our own inner dimensions. Today, we will recognize that we are multidimensional beings and discover how to become aware of these dimensions, verify their existence, and even more importantly, learn how to establish a conscious and permanent presence in the higher dimensions of nature. Let's begin by examining what is a dimension? How many dimensions are there? And what are their specific characteristics? What is a dimension? A dimension is a level of consciousness, and a level of consciousness is a level of wisdom, that is, a way of perceiving reality. Our perception of reality is directly shaped by our level of consciousness. An awakened being with a high level of consciousness and a refined vibratory state can not only perceive all dimensions, both higher and lower, but can also access and move through them at will. On the other hand, a being with a lower level of consciousness, due to a denser vibratory state, inhabits and interacts with lower dimensions. Such a being is unable to perceive the reality of dimensions beyond their own. There are as many dimensions as there are levels of consciousness, and each individual has a unique level of consciousness. This is why people perceive reality differently. A person with an elevated level of consciousness experiences reality in a completely different way than someone with a lower level. Our suffering, pain, and the number of negative thoughts and emotions we experience are all determined by our level of consciousness, by how we perceive reality. We see reality through the lens of our own psychological defects, or, in their absence, through consciousness. By eliminating the psychological defects that trap and condition our consciousness, we elevate our level of awareness. As a result, our perception of reality undergoes a profound transformation. The moment our perception shifts, we are no longer in the same dimension. The lower the dimension, the more intense the suffering, ignorance, materialism, and pain. The higher the dimension, the greater the freedom, happiness, and wisdom. We can understand dimensions in two ways: externally, as parallel worlds beyond the physical third dimension, and internally, as levels of consciousness that define how we perceive reality. Ultimately, the internal and external are deeply interconnected. Raising our level of consciousness immediately grants us access to higher dimensions in nature. All dimensions can be synthesized into the 7 fundamental dimensions of nature, which we will explore today. It is important to understand that when our spark, or consciousness, first emanated from the unmanifested God, the Absolute Sun, the divine source from which we all originate, it unfolded through these 7 dimensions. With each unfolding, as the spark moved further from the Absolute, both the number of governing laws and the degree of materiality increased. In the Absolute Sun, only one law reigns, the law of love. There, existence is pure plenitude and happiness. However, as creation descends, the different dimensions emerge. With each descent, the unfolding becomes denser. Each dimension is governed by an increasing number of laws, and consequently, there are more limitations, more suffering, and greater materiality. Creation moves from the subtle to the dense. As the ego multiplies, these dimensions become heavier, and consciousness falls into progressively lower states. Let's look at each dimension in detail so we can understand this better. Let's look at the first dimension, which is the lowest. The first dimension is the longitude, or the distance between 2 points. Here, all the distances or linear measurements enter, such as the meter, the kilometer, the rod, etc. The world that belongs to the first dimension is called Tritocosm, also known as Hell. This is the world of all atoms. In this world inhabit all the species of mono-brained, creatures that have only one brain, which is the emotional one. Like stones and minerals, although we see them inert and believe that they have no life, having a spark inside, they not only have life but are also capable of feeling likes and dislikes. This dimension is also inhabited by bi-brained beings that possess both an emotional brain and a motor instinctive sexual brain yet lack a spine. Examples include insects, worms, plants, and similar organisms. These mono-brained and bi-brained creatures without spines perceive the world in a linear way. Although we perceive them in a three-dimensional way because a higher dimension can perceive a lower one, they don't perceive us in the same way. They see us as points at the end of their line of vision. The inner movement of the beings that inhabit this dimension is linear. That is, they only move from liking to disliking. They oscillate between pain and pleasure and back to pain again, much like a plant that feels thirst and is then satisfied, or an insect driven by the need to reproduce and then mates. This cyclical pattern defines their entire existence as they move from one point to another in a continuous linear progression. Within us, this dimension is located in our sexual glands, in our seminal system. There is our ego, and our ego also moves linearly, constantly going from pleasure to pain. The subdimensions within this first dimension range from 192 to 24,576 laws, representing the varying degrees of limitations to which beings in this dimension can be subject. This wide spectrum of constraints illustrates how dense and restrictive this dimension can become. The second dimension is the surface, or the displacement of a line in space. In this dimension, we find all the bi-brained, or beings that have two brains, the emotional brain and the motor instinctive sexual brain that also possess a spine. Like dogs, cats, cows, birds, etc., these beings experience likes and dislikes, can move, reproduce, and instinctively record emotions. As a result, they store sensations which allows them to develop emotions such as fear and certain states of sadness. The beings that inhabit this dimension perceive reality in a two-dimensional way. They perceive us as overlapping planes, like the two-dimensional cartoons we used to watch on TV. This is the world of 96 laws, and it is called Limbo, or Hall of Hell. In this dimension are all the surfaces, or surface measurements, such as the square meter, the square foot, the square rod, the square kilometer, the hectare, etc. They are all the surfaces of things that are given by two dimensions, length by width or height. In this dimension, we find our personality and all our superficiality, the appearances of the volumes, the physical forms. This dimension is quite heavy. It is governed by 96 laws. These two dimensions, the first and the second, are our infradimensions, or dimensions inferior to this third dimension in which we live. Let us now see the third dimension, or dimension of volume. Here we are going to find all the bodies or things with organic or inorganic physical presence, with three dimensions, length, width, and height. Therefore, here we find everything that has a volume. Here we find our physical body and all the measures that are cubic, like cubic meter, cubic centimeter, etc. As we can see, the two previous dimensions are contained in this dimension. In this third dimension, or physical world, inhabit all of us, the bipeds or three-brained rational animals, erroneously called men, with our three brains, the emotional, the motor instinctive sexual, and the intellectual. And since we have three brains, we can self-realize by humanizing and de-animalizing in any of our 108 existences as humans. We possess an intellectual brain, which grants us the ability to reflect on our actions and judge ourselves. Additionally, a crucial distinction sets us apart from the animals of the second dimension, our upright spine. This upright spine symbolizes the stairway to heaven, or the pathway through which we can elevate our sexual energy toward our higher centers. By doing so, we have the potential to transform and become self-realized beings, transcending our current state of existence. This dimension is subject to 48 laws. Its importance lies in the fact that in this dimension, we already have a physical body, which is a condenser of sexual creative energy. Through the act of sexual union with a partner of the opposite sex, masculine with feminine, we have the potential to transmute this sexual energy. This process enables the creation of the existential bodies of the being, which are essential for attaining a presence in the higher dimensions of nature. In this way, the third dimension serves as a foundational platform for our spiritual evolution and self-realization. It is important to point out that although our physical body moves in this third dimension, our psychology constantly inhabits the second and first dimensions because we are constantly moved by our personality and our ego. And the heavier the psychological defect that manifests itself in us, our psychology is subjected to more laws, then the heavier it becomes. We are fully experiencing this third dimension only when we can stay focused, living in the present moment, in the here and now. But the true permanent inhabitants of this third dimension are those who have already regenerated their physical body by transmuting their sexual energy and already possess a solar physical body. In us, this dimension is located in our sexual center, and it represents our earth element. The fourth dimension is the dimension of time. It is the duration of our physical body, or the duration of any volume, the time that elapses between birth and death. For instance, as human beings, we are enveloped by an energetic layer known as the etheric body, or vital body. This vital body, which is also subject to the 48 laws of the physical world, constitutes the energetic counterpart of our physical form. It exists as the higher aspect of our physical body and defines our fourth dimensional existence. This energy determines the length of time we will live, shaping the temporal boundaries of our life in the physical world. This body represents our waters, which are 90% of our physical body. In these waters, we find all the metallic atoms of our seminal system contained in the golden field, and these are the ones we need to regenerate and release. If, due to the misuse of our internal energies or inner waters, we allow our etheric body or vital body to become excessively depleted, we may find ourselves physically worn out, aged, and ill, even at a young age such as 30 or 40. This occurs because the fourth dimension, our vitality, has been squandered. As a result, our productive and vibrant lifespan will be significantly shorter compared to someone who has wisely conserved and utilized their energy. Proper stewardship of our inner energies is therefore crucial for maintaining health, vitality, and longevity. The requirement for us to govern this fourth dimension is that we begin to save our sexual energy, that we achieve chastity, which is the virtue of all those who learn not to waste their energy. Here, consciously inhabit all beings who have already regenerated their vital bodies. This fourth dimension is that parallel world, where the so-called Jina's paradises exist. In us, this dimension is found in our instinctive center. Now let's look at the fifth dimension. This is the dimension of eternity. Here we also find time, but continuously, without beginning or end. Thus, we see how the previous dimensions are contained in this one. That is why we find here the past, the present, and the future in a continuous way. When we unfold or project to the fifth dimension, everything is handled in an eternal present, and we can see what has happened a long time ago or what will happen in the future, as if it were happening right now. This dimension is subdivided into two: the lower fifth dimension, or astral world, and the upper fifth dimension, or mental world, with their corresponding bodies, which handle different functions and have their own characteristics. In order for us to have a permanent and conscious presence in this dimension, we must create our astral and our mental bodies. Right now, we only possess a principle or embryo of these bodies that allow us to make brief astral and mental projections and to do some research in those dimensions. Let's talk about each of these worlds that make up the fifth dimension. The lower fifth dimension is the astral world. In us, this lower fifth dimension, or astral world, is located in our emotional center, at the level of the navel, on the spine. This dimension is governed by only 24 laws, half the laws of the physical world. Therefore, there is less materiality there, and there are fewer limitations. In this world, we move with the astral body, which is molecular in nature, not cellular like the physical body. For this reason, in the astral world, we can stretch a finger and it stretches, or we can, for example, go through walls. This body manages our emotions, our fire, and it is controlled by the salamanders, which are the elementals of fire. To create this astral body and have a permanent and conscious presence in this dimension, it is necessary, in addition to using our sexual energy for this purpose, that we achieve total control of our emotions. Even to achieve conscious astral travel, it is necessary to have some control over our emotions, because if we get scared while doing the practice, or if we get very excited, we immediately return to the physical body. The higher fifth dimension, or mental world, is where beings who have already created their mental body have conscious presence. At that point, the person already has full control over his mind and over his thoughts. This dimension is located at the level of the heart in the spine. In this world, we move using our mental body, which handles 12 laws. It is atomic in nature and corresponds to air or wisdom and originates our intellect, the way of thinking of each of our atoms. It is controlled by the sylphs and sylphids of air. As this dimension is governed only by 12 laws, materiality and heaviness are much less there. For that reason, there is a greater freedom of movement compared to the astral world, since we are limited there by half the laws. Now let's look at the sixth dimension. This dimension is called reality or the truth. Here we find what is, what has been, and what will be. And this, like the previous one, is also subdivided into two worlds, the lower sixth dimension or causal world and the upper sixth dimension or Buddhic world. Here we find the planets of the Christ, the electromagnetic worlds. It is to this dimension where those who, through transcendental meditation, reach samadhi or the illuminating void, escape. There, they experience the happiness and freedom of being under only 6 laws, which are the ones that govern the sixth dimension. In the lower sixth dimension, we find the causal world, or world of conscious will. Here we find our causal body, or body of will, governed by 6 laws. This body is electric in nature, formed by all the electrons of our atoms. It represents our word, or sexual creative energy, and all creations. This is the world of all causes, have a conscious presence here, all the beings who have had the will to deny themselves, to dominate their inner nature, and have created the 5 bodies that make them true men. Those who have already reached this point will have created their human soul. They are already real men who have developed the garments of the soul, which are those 5 existential bodies. The causal world in us is located at the level of the throat, in the spine. The upper part of the sixth dimension is the Buddhic world, or world of consciousness. This world is what we could define as the heavens. It is governed by 6 laws and is magnetic in nature, made up of all the protons, which are the positive charge of atoms. In this world, we can already perceive what is the reality or the truth. Have the right to inhabit this Buddhic world those who, having already created their human soul, which are the 5 previous bodies, have joined their divine soul or buddhi, and have achieved the so-called perfect matrimony, or union between the human and the divine. The Buddhic body is raised in all human beings, waiting for them to develop their human soul. In us, the Buddhic world is found in the pituitary gland, which is in the brain, in the point between the eyebrows. The last one is the 7th dimension. Here we can meet our intimate, subject to only 3 laws. Here, happiness and freedom are something indescribable for us. Here is the world of light, or Atmic world. This dimension is known as the Great Reality. This dimension is photonic in nature. The photon is already light, wisdom. In us, it is found in our pineal gland. This dimension is the lowest that our being can reach, since it comes from the world of the spirit. The Atmic body is the Christic principle in each one of us. It is our particular warrior. The Atmic body didn't fall either. It is raised in each one of us. Here we can see in detail where each of these dimensions is found in us. As we progress in the process of self-knowledge, we will become aware of this reality, and the idea is that through inner work we can awaken our consciousness, have a conscious presence, and move at will in each of these dimensions. As we can see, as we go higher, the dimensions are lighter in nature, from cellular, then etheric, then molecular, atomic, electronic, protonic, to photonic. Now let's see what are the methods with which we can start to check and know these higher dimensions from now on. How can we visit these dimensions? We really perceive the 3rd dimension when we begin to live in the present moment, the here and now. To go from the 3rd dimension to the 4th, the genus state is used. To go from the 3rd dimension to the 5th, the astral and mental projections are used. To go from the 3rd dimension to the 6th and 7th, meditation is used. The practice of these methods is necessary to be able to directly verify and know these dimensions. In this course, we have already learned about astral projection, and we will continue learning more about that practice and about the other practices that will allow us to visit these dimensions. Now, what is really important is that we manage to have a permanent and conscious presence in the higher dimensions. And we will achieve this with the work on the 3 factors for the revolution of consciousness: psychological death, spiritual birth, and sacrifice for humanity. Psychological death allows us to free the consciousness and purify the sexual creative energy. The spiritual birth through the practice of suprasex allows us to create the existential bodies of the being, which are the vehicles that will allow us to have presence and to move at will in these dimensions. And the sacrifice for humanity will allow us to get rid of our selfishness by helping others and awaken love, which is the only law of the Absolute. So we must understand that it is not possible to ascend in the superior dimensions without eliminating the heavy and grotesque of our personality. And it is not possible to have a real representation in a dimension without having created the corresponding body. We came to planet Earth to self-realize and achieve full consciousness, and this is only possible by going down to the infradimensions, where 97% of our essence or consciousness is trapped within our ego, and freeing it by eliminating all our psychological defects. Without working on ourselves, it is not possible to create anything. And well, this has been today's conference. We thank everyone who participated in this topic. Remember that you can leave your questions in comments. I invite you to the next topic, in which we will talk about the protection conjurations so that we learn to energetically clean our environment to protect our energy and unmask false beings of light or fake masters. Don't miss that interesting topic. Until next time.